The Atari ST, a classic mid-80s machine. Legendary, in fact, but mine's been sitting in a box in a cupboard for several years. It's time to dust it off and bring it back out into the light and see what she can do.
The Atari 520ST has twice the power of many business micros. It handles business with ease. It can paint pictures and make them move. It can play advanced games. Yet it costs less than £300. The Atari 520ST, power without the price.
Atari weren't new to innovative computing, and they'd had their 400 and 800 out for quite a while. They both launched in 1979, and they failed to meet expectations mostly because they promised cheap and affordable computing for all, but then the prices were revealed and it wasn't quite that simple. I think it was about £500 for the 400 and closer to £1,000 for the 800, and this wasn't the price point that they'd been boasting that they were going to meet previously, but both machines were possibly the most advanced 8-bit machines of their time, being more capable than contemporaries such as the Mac. The advert here shows a different picture because this is coming up to 1984. The machines have been out for about 5 years. The ST was just around the corner, and the Commodore 64 was having a whale of a time in the market, and it retailed at around £200. So for Atari to compete, they had to slash the prices quite dramatically of those machines. So now they were affordable, but probably getting a little bit dated by this time. So Atari got its promises right this time. It came in at a pretty sweet price point, around £750. Will get you this complete system, suitable for both business and pleasure, a high-resolution monitor, an external floppy disk drive, a mouse, and the machine itself. So the main competition for the ST at this time was the Amiga 1000. The ST beat it to the market by a few months, so had a bit of an advantage there. The Amiga was a much better spec machine, but still ran on the same Motorola 68000 processor, but a similar sort of setup as we see on this advert would have cost you around 3 times as much. So you're getting into the ballpark using that same processor as those machines, including the Apple Mac as well, all using the Motorola 68000. You can get into that same ballpark with those machines at a much, much more reasonable price. As shown by this advert, the others were all a damn rip-off. There were a few evolutions of the 520 model. The next one was the 520ST-N, and that included a modulator so that you could attach it to a television set, which I guess made it easier for gaming. And then we ended up with what I have, which is the ST-FM, and that also added the floppy drive into the mix as well. So this machine has a built-in floppy drive and also the modulator for using a television. So this is a 520ST-FM. I tried to date it specifically. I think it's a fairly early one, so guessing 86, 87. Got it cheap on eBay, come from what looked like an office sale, so it came with some business software. It was kind of badly labelled, so I got it for a good price. Just bought it out of curiosity more than anything, so it's been sitting in a cupboard doing absolutely nothing. I figure it's time to show this thing some love. I'm a PC guy mostly, and I've got some games for this, but I prefer to play them on the PC when I do my vintage gaming. So I needed to think of something to do with this. Of course, the Atari ST is legendary for its MIDI abilities and its music producing capabilities. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of as a project to use this for. So this is it. A bit different looking from what I'm used to with all my PCs with the extra bits hanging off it. I mean, the mouse is okay, but the keyboard attached to the computer. I suppose it's quite a compact, neat little arrangement, but just a bit inflexible. It's quite a cool looking thing. The funky little function key row across the top, it's got a very distinctive look. Tucked away at the bottom here, we've got 2 Atari standard joystick ports, which is good for multiple play. One of them can be used for a mouse as well. These are Atari standards, so you can use your 2600 controllers, you can use your Master System controllers, and a whole bunch of others, so it gives you a whole big choice of joysticks and peripherals to use. So we have the famous MIDI in and MIDI out jack built into the machine next to a cartridge port, so I guess there's cartridge-based software that you can get for it. Along the back we've got a modem jack compatible with any RS-232 industry standard modem. a printer port for the Atari ST printer, a connector to add an external hard disk drive, a jack to connect an external floppy disk drive, RF output to connect to a television set, connector for the Atari RGB and the Atari monochrome monitor, a nice clicky on-off switch, standard power connector for a power lead, and a little system reset button at the bottom right hand corner. Pop a keycap and have a look. It looks like a slightly oversized Cherry MX style connector, not really sure what kind of switches they are. On the back we've got serial number information, voltages, etc. So this looks like it was made in Taiwan. And at the end of that, Atari Corporation, Sunnyvale, California, 94086. So that could possibly mean made in 1986, I guess. Now for the exciting bit, let's pop this baby open and see what delights await us inside the case. And there's the keyboard off, and it's actually sitting on top of a fairly solid PCB. And I did think about taking this apart to have a look inside, but then I found some information online, so decided not to. Looking on the Desk Authority website, it seems that the ST, STM, ST-FM all had an unlabeled keyboard, so they don't actually know who made it, but the keys look like a type that were patented by a company called Silatech. It's a company that I've come across a few times because two of my other keyboards turned out to be made by Silatech, my Commodore multimedia keyboard and one of my Dell Quiet keys as well. To get to the motherboard you have to remove a few sections of shielding, and it's quite well covered. You can't see a damn thing apart from shielding when you first go into this thing. It was a bit fiddly. It took me a while to figure out that I actually had to remove the power supply first before I could get this thing off. Before I did that, I took the floppy disk drive out, and as far as I can tell, this thing's just a standard IDE floppy, though I may be wrong, but it just looks like it has the same connectors as a PC floppy. And then I could take the power supply out. This is a Mitsumi power supply. I've never seen one of those before. And that allowed this last large piece of shielding to be removed, revealing the motherboard. So I quickly scanned over this. It looks in good nick. It isn't the usual shitfest that you sometimes find in these old machines. And all the caps look to be in good condition, and it all looks to be pretty clean and nice. So the heart of the beast, the Motorola 68000, running at 8 megahertz. A space for the legendary Blitter chip, but there isn't one on this machine, so possibly in the future. I don't know whether you can just add them in if I can find one. I think this might be the MMU chip that works in conjunction with another chip. We'll get to that in a minute. The TOS operating system can come on a different number of chips. In this particular model, it looks like there's 2, and it's running TOS 1.02. Then we've got some memory. I don't know whether this machine originally came with 512 kilobytes, but it has a megabyte on it, so I guess it's either been upgraded or it just came that way. Then there's some RF circuitry for the television output. A Yamaha YM2149F for sound, which I believe was a pretty poor sound chip compared to the competition. And then it looks like we have a Western Digital floppy drive controller. I'm not sure, but I think this is a shifter chip, and that works in conjunction with another chip called the MMU, and that manages RAM address buses and video signals and things like that. So I'm not sure if there's much I'm going to be able to do to upgrade this or have a bit of fun with it, but I'll have a little investigation. Possibly that Blitter chip's a target for a project in the future, but all it needs now is a little bit of a brush with the anti-static brush, and it's good to go. So to begin with, I just got a crappy old LCD TV that has an RF import, and we'll fire it up with that and see what it looks like. It boots okay, so putting it back together hasn't done any harm, and all I can say is it looks truly horrendous on this LCD screen. So now I decided to plug it into a CRT TV, so I guess this is going to be the classic setup for a kid in his bedroom with his own portable television back in the late 80s, early 90s, playing his games on a setup like this, and again, it looks pretty horrible. But to honour that time when we were less discerning, and this would have been a pretty cool setup for a teenage me back in the day, got to play a little bit of a game before we go on and look at other things, and we're going to take a look at Zool the Warrior from the Nth Dimension. Well, those sounds bring it all flooding back. Well, I never played this on the ST because I didn't have an ST. I did play it on the PC when it first came out back in the day. I remember it came with a free Chupa Chup lollipop in the box, which was rather cool, and a rather nice poster of Zool to put on the wall also. It was also quite a thing because it was one of the first side-scrolling platform games that worked really well on the PC back in the day. But it is really music I want to use this computer for, so let's take a look at some music software and see what that looks like. The only piece of software I have for music making for the Atari ST is this Quartet, which is a note-based sequencer, and there's various other tools and programs on these discs to manipulate samples and things like that. It's not really probably what you'd want to use for making serious music. You'd be better off using something like Cubase, which is a natural and famous pairing with the Atari ST from back in the day, but this is a simple program that will get me going, give me a feel for what I can do with it, and maybe get a little MIDI setup built up around this, and then go on to do some more experimentation in the future. So that actually sounds a bit better than I thought it was going to sound. So this is just using samples that are included on the discs. It's a bit fuzzy to be looking at sort of detailed things like music staves on this fuzzy monitor, so I imagine that would get quite wearing quite quickly, but it sounds a bit better than I thought it was going to, so at least there's potential there to make some real music and get into making music on the Atari ST. And that brings us to the real reason why I got the old ST out of the cupboard again, and that's because I came across this and got this for a good price on eBay. And this is a high-resolution monochrome monitor, which is used for visually intensive things like staring at sequences for long periods of time. It's got a super crisp image and is the only monitor that will work with the high-resolution mode of the Atari ST. Color monitors will only work with low and medium resolutions. Yeah, now that's what I'm talking about. That's crispy, and you can see it automatically selects high resolution and won't let you select anything else. Apologies for the rolling screen. My camera isn't quite up to matching the refresh rate of this monitor, whatever that may be, but it certainly looks a lot better, and I can imagine it would be a lot easier on the eyes spending a long time looking at this. When I tried to load Quartet initially, it was telling me that I couldn't load at this resolution, and then it transpires as a separate exe for running for the high resolution monitor. So this is something I never really thought about before. There's no sound options that come out of the Atari ST, so there's no speaker connectors or anything like that, at least not on this model. So sound was coming out of the television when I was playing the game, but I wasn't sure about this monitor. When I first plugged it in, nothing came out. But then it turns out that it does indeed have a built-in speaker, though not a very good one and not a very loud one. And bizarrely, the volume knob is marked with the contrast symbol that you would normally see on a television. But it gives you something, and I definitely think that it would benefit from being able to get the sound out of this thing and through a set of studio monitors or something like that. So that's a potential project for the future also. That just about wraps it up for this video. So this monitor has given me a good excuse to get this Atari ST out and try and make some music on it, which is probably one of the main reasons why I got it in the first place, but then did nothing. Now I've got this monitor, I can make a nice little setup somewhere in a corner of my games room upstairs and try and get some cool vintage MIDI machines to go with it and make some rockin' dance tunes like they did back in the 90s. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing. And for those of you celebrating Christmas, I hope you have an amazing festive period and may your stockings be filled with amazing vintage retro tech. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.